Cosmo Maniacs, Tim Sullivan. Get up. And the producer of the documentary you just watched, Michael Press.
Bye here. I'm being bye.
All right. I have to tell you, I was up in the projection room, and you know me in projection rooms, if you've seen the last showing. But I'm watching it, and you know, this is a little bit, you guys, I'm getting old. I'm an old dog, and it's a little bit like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn going to their own funeral, hearing all of these wonderful colleagues and friends talk about you, Tim included. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, because to thine own self be true. This is not a movie about talent. If you're going to make a movie about a talented actor, make a documentary about Daniel Day-Lewis, or some of my favorite character actors, Strother Martin and Warren Oates and Bruce Dern and people like that. But it's a movie about an old fart that survived. And literally this month is my 50th year in Hollywood. 50 years ago today, I was outside of Atlanta in Statesboro, Georgia, home of the Allman Brothers. And I was starring in my first movie. It was my first audition. It was my first movie for Daniel Petrie, who directed, among other things, Daniel's the whitest guy in the world, and he was the director of Sidney Poitier's Raising in the Sun. And it's just been a great ride ever since. So, ask some questions. Well, Buster, 1973, spring of 73, and it's the spring of 2023. So, it's a round number. I like that.
Well, Michael, tell me how this documentary came about. Was this something Robert had to be talked into? Was it something he was excited about?
You know, honestly, this was my third experience with Robert. I first got acquainted with this man during Never Sleep Again. That was a lot of fun.
And let me just say, this is not, I am not a producer or a collaborator on Never Sleep Again. This is Heather Langenkamp's pet project. And it's, if you love the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, it's truly a wonderful behind-the-scenes experience, as well as a great coffee table book.
yeah, and the coffee table book. And then I got to work with Heather on I Am Nancy, and Robert was involved with that as well. So the directors that you saw at the beginning doing the introduction, Gary Smartin, Adam Evans, and Christopher Griffiths, they come out here from the UK every summer, and we decide what are we gonna do. And you know, again, Elm Street's always brought up, but it's been done. Like, I mean, there's really not much left to talk about. And Gary, being a huge fan of Robert, was like, do you have his email? And I said, yeah, I got his email. And he goes, well, why don't we do just a documentary on Robert's career? Because he's so much more than Freddy Krueger. And if you just watched, you saw that. So we reached out to Robert, and I don't think it took much to get the man to say, okay, let's do it.
You know, actually, one of the things was that Chris Griffins,
yes,
and Gary Smart, shooting the shit with those guys and getting to know them, feeling them out a bit over a cocktail or two, I realized they were like having your own personal IMDb database. And my agent and lifelong friend, Joe Rice, also had done a little checking out of these guys. And he said, these are really good guys, cult screenings, cult films. They really knew how to do their research and development, their R&D. But I fell in love with them because they weren't just genre fans, although they were genre fans, but you could talk about anything with them. If I was struggling for the name of a character actor from England, from a Hammer film, oh God, and they would go, Herbert Lom, and I would go, yes, Herbert Lom, he did a Phantom of the Opera, and he worked with, Christopher Lee, and he did several of my favorite Hammer films, and they were always there with that answer, and it was very, very wide. We talked about, I remember talking about a wide-angle, black and white VistaVision television series around the same time they were doing the old Route 66 series, which you can imagine they were on location all over America. This one was called Stony Brook, with, of all people, Jack Lord from the original Hawaii Five-0. I think I just got a residual from them on my TV. But anyway, Jack Lord played a rodeo cowboy, and he was sidekicked by Warren Oates and Andrew Prine. And Andrew Prine was I was trying to find this in my mind's eye. Andrew Prine did a TV movie with with Deborah Raffin, and he had shaved his head. Now Andrew Prine, for a lot of you, as kids, if you saw The Miracle Worker, he's the brother of Helen Keller. But he also had starred with me in V, so I knew Andy, and he had done this performance of a serial killer with a shaved head, and the show opened with a girl dropping an egg from her refrigerator, and as the egg fell to the ground in slow motion, we heard the screams and cries of an airliner going down. And she had this connection with this guy, and I realized he'd really influenced part of my, along with Klaus Kinski, part of what I used as Freddy Krueger. And I was trying to get to that with, Gary Smart and Chris Griffins, and they went, oh yeah, Jack Lord, yeah. They knew the director they knew everything. They knew that show, they knew that TV movie, they knew David Aykroyd, the other actors I'd worked with, and I knew that these guys had my back. I knew you guys had my back. Because, there's a lot of ego in surrendering yourself to a documentary. And it also can kind of feel like the end of your career, like your tombstone. But with these guys, we sort of had this fun with it and played with the fan perspective. And I'm just really happy and grateful.
It's a celebration.
Were there any surprises for you, Robert, in it? Any of the things that people were saying about you?
It's real hard. These are all friends that you just saw on the screen, and these are people I've worked with more than once. Tim too, and I remember Tim when he was an intern at New Line, and he actually told me he was going to make a movie, and I think we were hanging around in the prop trailer of Nightmare 4, I think, and Tim was like this, he had this long blonde hair, and he was this beautiful young kid, and he was tall, and he said, I'm going to make this movie.
What happened?
If you make it, I'll do it, because I knew he was, apprenticed to Michael DeLuca, and I knew that Michael was going places, and obviously he is. He practically runs.
I don't know if you know this. I went to NYU Film School with Michael DeLuca, and he and I went and saw Freddy's Revenge on the first day it came out. And he said to me, one day I'm going to be running a film studio, and you're going to be making a movie with Robert Englund.
I also heard your names from an old friend of mine who was at Tisch School of Arts at NYU then, I think, David Irving.
He was Nancy Irving's brother.
Amy Irving's brother,
Amy Irving, I'm thinking Nancy.
Yeah, no, that's
Amy Irving.
Amy, as in you guys, as in Carrie and the Fury, Amy Irving.
And he was my producing professor, and I learned so much from him. And he said the best producer is the person who is filming his new movie while attending the premiere of his last, while prepping his next one.
Well, I was just going to ask Tim, you said in this documentary you talked about how supportive Robert was and everything, but I'm curious, it's such a gift as first-time director to have an actor like this. What kinds of things did you learn from Robert about directing and about working with actors that informed the movie and that you kind of carried forward?
Well, one of the things, is that Robert learned the lines of every single actor in the movie, every single character, so that at any given time, if he could help them. You're always about helping everybody, almost to a fault.
Well, the other thing is, on a horror movie, and there's always kids, You know, who's next? Who am I going to get next? And what the kids don't know is that there's a lot of elements, whether it's CGI, whether it's practical effects, whether it's just lighting, or just simply a prop piece of business. There are so many elements, and they all want to go 110% on every take. And somebody once told me, and I wish I could remember who, because it was some of the best advice I ever got. And they said that it's better to be at 75% and have the light in your eye than to be at 100% and be kind of split by the frame or off your mark. And you're also costing the company for that effect that's being shot, all those elements that are surrounding you, the car pulling up, the flame bars behind you exploding, whatever. And so I would try to tell the young actors I work with, and this is after I'm in my mid to late 40s. I would not have presumed to do it earlier, but by then I felt good enough to say, hey, you guys, don't beat yourselves up. Find your mark, find your light, and let's repeat what we've rehearsed. Because we found it, we discovered it with inspiration, and our job is to duplicate the inspiration we found in rehearsal.
The thing you said to me on the first day, which I have said to so many young filmmakers for advice, you took me aside and you're like, Tim, remember, the audience sees the donut, not the whole. They will not see what you envision. They will only see what you give them. So if we don't make our days, if we don't get everything, edit the movie in your hands, not the movie in the script. And that was very helpful to me, because when you're making a film and you got 14 days and suddenly one of them's gone because of the rain, that's right, the audience will never know what we wanted to do that we didn't get to do, and that changed everything for me.
Well, Tim was also in the unique position of having to move from the control of Hollywood to the wild, wild west of Georgia. What Lynn Shay and I realized, and some other people, was just how great it looked, how great it was going to look, for a low-budget film, because we got this incredible production value out of our new location. But all Tim could hear, Tim was like Captain Hook and Peter Pan, all he could hear is the tick-tock, tick-tock of the crocodile of time coming after him,
Well, before I open up to the audience, I want to ask you a little bit about Freddy versus Jason, because that's what we started the day with. How many people were here for the whole day around Englund?
Oh, the people with the flat eyeballs, something.
Yeah, so you weren't here for Freddy versus Jason, but you said you had some stories to tell us about the young actors you worked with in that.
Well, I'm trying to think. I did have some Freddy versus Jason stories. Give me a second here. Here's a great story. Destiny's Child. Kelly Rowland. And, I used to go to the set with her sometimes, and, everybody wants Kelly to be urban and street, and Destiny's Child and Beyonce. But in real life, she's kind of like Audrey Hepburn. And she had a sassoon cut then, and she was just such a cutie, and she had a little dog with her. But when you have the #1 song in the world, and that was the song she duetted with Nelly. Some of you might remember that song. I'm not going to remember it right now. I'm an old fart. But she had the #1 song in the world with Nelly. And it's a jinx on your career if you turn down Tops of the Pops. And Tops of the Pops is a BBC show that's been on since before the Beatles, with Cliff Richards and people like that, and Petula Clark. And you have to do it. If you have a hit, you have to do this show. So in the middle of shooting, they sent Kelly all the way to London from Vancouver to appear with Nelly on Tops of the Pops. And then they flew her back. And when she landed, she had to come to the set in the middle of the night and do the scene where she disses Freddie. And she nailed it on the second take. That's what a pro she was. She was great. Then, of course, they put a chain on her, yanked her into a tree or something. But I was just blown away, that she could do that, jet lagged and having performed in London and then coming back and nailing that sequence where she, you know, tells Freddie, you know, everything that she thinks he's wrong, just disses him, you know, right out of her culture, you know, which was what, you know, Freddie's always throwing the culture of his victims back in their face, and it was kind of fun to have someone finally do it to Freddie. But that's a story. Also, that's me, and all the underwater stuff is me, okay? Because I can hold my breath longer than the Navy SEAL. Yeah, because I'm an old surfer. Yeah. And I was in my goddamn 50s then, so I'm impressed. How'd you guys like my fight scenes and Stay Hungry, huh? Yeah. That's all actor and actor. Those were all actor and director rehearsed. We didn't use stuntmen because we wanted it to all be like the characters would fight.
You were in Maniacs. You saw it in the film. You insisted on jumping over that fireball yourself, firebar, and landing on that table. And I actually walked off the set. I was like, please let me know it worked. And and with the sword.
Tim, I just wanted to get to bed.
Yeah, that's true. You also have to remember you had one eye covered, and you're doing the sword fight with one eye.
That's true. I had no peripheral vision on one side, so that does make it a bit more difficult. Are we going to take some questions?
Yeah, let's pivot to the...
From the peeps that have been here since, what, 11 a.m. this morning? All right, who's going to call on people?
You want to call or you want me to call?
I can't see a thing.
Okay, I'll call. Right there. Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming. Big fan. After so many years playing Freddy Krueger, have you ever had a nightmare with Freddy?
I have, and it's a good story, but I'm sure a lot of you have heard it before, but I'll tell it again. So on Nightmare 1, I'm shooting a sequence with Heather Langenkamp, who was supposed to be here, and she's ill. We love her, Nancy. Heather and I were going to do this sequence. It was an exterior at night. And this is Nightmare 1. I did not have a star trailer. I had a star trailer on V, but this was a low-budget movie. I was in this little honey wagon, you know, next to the men's room trailer, you know, which smelled a little bit because all the Teamsters are in there all day having a cigarette and reading a sports page and having a dump. And so I'm in my little dressing room with a narrow cot, and opposite my narrow cot is a mirror with bulbs around it, the traditional classic stereotype makeup mirror. And they're on dimmers, and I got the dimmer turned down low because it's 3 a.m, it's approaching the hour of the wolf, and I'm trying to get a nap, and I've got my makeup on, but I'm new to the makeup, you guys, and I'm really protective of it. And I roll up a towel really tight and put it under my head so that I won't, you know, roll either way and smear it like I would on a pillow or sleeping on my arm. And I'm dozing off, and I hear, Mr. Englund, Mr. Englund, and I wake up, and it's the AD. We're gonna try to get this shot before the sun comes up. And I sit up in my cot, and I look, and there, 2.5, 3 feet from me, and even deeper in the forced perspective of the makeup mirror, illuminated by the dimmer switch, with the light bulbs turned down to just their ghosting illumination, is this old, disfigured man looking at me. And I've got morning mouth, that bad breath you have when you take a nap or you just wake up in the morning. And I'm not completely conscious, I just woke up, and I don't know what the hell, where the hell I am. I see this old, deformed man looking back at me, you know, and he's disfigured, and I go, and the old man in the mirror goes, and then I realize it's me, I'm in the makeup. But it was so new to my experience portraying Freddy that I forgot I was in the makeup. And that moment, I can close my eyes as I'm sitting here and remember it and see it. And I hope I describe my pathetic little dressing room with enough detail so that you believe me. But I do occasionally have that moment interfere with my sleep. And it does, I do dream that once in a while. That's my Freddy nightmare.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if you are all familiar with the character Vecna from Stranger Things, but, and someone here will shout out his name for me, but the actor that plays Vecna is superb. He's just a remarkable English actor. And the last time I saw him, he was on his way to Venice, Italy for a festival, and I was giving him some restaurants to go to. But, you know, I don't know what Freddie would say to Vecna. I think he might be upset because I think Vecna has stolen Freddie's cat-like walk a little bit. You know, that kind of pelvic thrust that Freddie has. He kind of leads with his pelvis. So I might have to shame him a little bit on that. But that's just a wonderful character and a wonderful makeup. And the same people that do the Vecna makeup did my makeup for Stranger Things, and they also created the Night King for for Game of Thrones. They're really brilliant, brilliantly talented guys. Next question.
Let's go all the way up there in the back in the center.
I saw on Never Sleep Again that Wes Craven had written a script for Dream Warriors. I'm a huge fan of Dream Warriors, but I was wondering if, outside of all the New Line politics and after all this time, if you think that Wes Craven script would have made a better movie.
The Dream Warriors script, as I understand it, does have a lot of Wes Craven's input. Also, Brian Englund and the guy that did Force Majeure.
Bruce Wagner.
Again, Bruce Wagner. Bruce Wagner, brilliant guy. And I knew Bruce from Hollywood parties and stuff. Really talented guy. Brian Englund has an Oscar now. Early last year, when COVID was diminishing, Heather Langenkamp organized a reading of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors at the old Whiskey A Go-Go on Sunset Boulevard. And I mean, if we'd have gone in there with a blue light, you probably would have seen, you know, semen stains from Jim Morrison on the wall. But anyway, the nostalgia, it was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And we're all packed in there, and we all go down, and we all have these scripts on our little podiums and our microphones. And Chuck Russell has volunteered to read everything but the dialogue, all the directions, the establishing shots, etc. And I'm in there reading. I think Freddie has 2 lines in that movie, you know. So I'm just sort of sitting there relaxed. I've had a couple of glasses of wine. And I look down, and I'm following it, and Chuck starts. And I start to envy Chuck because it's the first draft. The very first draft of Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. And the between the dialogue descriptions of what's going on reads like a great Stephen King novel. It's that well written. So if any of you are fanboys or fangirls and you're at a con and they're selling Nightmare on Elm Street scripts or other scripts, look through them, especially on a Sunday when everything's a little cheaper. Look through them and see if you see that first draft Nightmare on Elm Street script, because I want one. I mean, it's terrific. And all I could think of when we got done with it, and we raised some money for Heather's charity, was I wish I would have volunteered to read all of the in between the dialogue stuff, because it was really dark poetry. That's really all I really know about the breakdown of Nightmare 3, and I don't really know what went into choosing the final draft for the shooting script.
Yeah, now all the way back. There you go.
Congratulations on an incredible documentary. Absolutely a phenomenal career.
Thank Michael here. He's still got circles under his eyes from post-production.
Perez, you have won incredible awards for your documentaries. I would love to know what you're working on next.
Oh my gosh. Currently, I'm on a secret project for AMC. I can't really say what that is, other than
Slipknot, the untold story.
Absolutely. Yeah. But coming out after this is a documentary on RoboCop. Following that will be a documentary on Police Academy.
Wow.
And then also I will be finishing up the Sleepaway Camp documentary.
Of the Nightmare on Elm Street, which one was the most fun to make?
I'm just going to repeat that so people in the back could hear. The question was, which of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies was the most fun to make?
Like especially for Robert.
Yeah, well, Tim had such a big role in Nightmare 9. Yes, Tim played the albino serial killer. I'll tell you, on Nightmare 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, we all had some serious bucks by then. I'm not going to be humble, or coy about that. And because there was a child in Nightmare 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, they had to shoot around his schedule a lot, and you got to use the child up during daytime. So they would bring me in really early, and a lot of the time I was done by 12:30, 1 in the afternoon, and I'd get my makeup taken off, and there was still catering around. There was still lunch being served, and I'm an actor, and I'm no fool, and my mother didn't raise no fool. I'm there for free food. Free lunch, I'm in there. But I'm already done. I'm Robert Englund, I'm Freddy Krueger. It's Nightmare on Elm Street 7. Okay, and I'm done for the day. I'm out of my makeup. I got to have a glass of wine, sit down, and enjoy my free lunch. Yes, Virginia, there is a free lunch. And guess who I got to eat with for weeks at a time in a beautiful part of the San Fernando Valley in front of a classic ranch house where Heather Langenkamp was supposed to live. I got to hang out every day with late, great John Sachs. Now, John was on the cusp of the golden age of movies. He was made a teen idol in the early 50s, but he knew Elvis Presley. He knew James Dean. You guys all know that he did Enter the Dragon, obviously. He knew Bruce Lee. He starred in Robert Redford's first movie called War Hunt, something like that. War Party. And he literally played a Native American who went into the no man's land in Korea and took scalps. That's how bad he was. He worked with Brando in the Appaloosa. Obviously, we just said Bruce Lee. He worked with Clint Eastwood and Robert Duvall in Joe Hill. He worked with Redford again in Electric Horseman. He dated Sandra Dee, Natalie Wood. His leading lady was Audrey Hepburn in a John Huston movie called The Unforgiven, with, among other people, Lillian Gish, who I worked with, which means if you play 6 Degrees of Robert Englund, I can go back to silent film stars. You can hook me up with Charlie Chaplin in 6 Degrees of Robert Englund. He worked with Lillian Gish. He worked with Audrey Hepburn, Burt Lancaster, John Huston. He worked with Quentin Tarantino on a 2-hour special episode of CSI. And I got John to tell all this stuff, and he was sharing this. So from the horse's mouth, I got this insight into that moment of time in Hollywood, early 50s, all the way through today, from John, and I treasure that, and that's what I took actually from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 7, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, is this relationship. We'd done 3 movies together and been around the world doing publicity, but he finally opened up to me, and now I can share that with you.
Who talked more, you or John?
Guys, I love to talk, but I also love to listen.
John, did you know that John actually wrote a prequel script to Nightmare on Elm Street? It was very, very serious, and it's basically that Freddy was kind of like a Charles Manson figure, and he was a cop investigating. He was that cop, Nancy's father. It was really good. There's so many Nightmare on Elm Street scripts that came to New Line, and a lot of them were excellent, but you made the right ones.
I remember I would just like try to get John to talk about what was Jimmy Stewart like on Mr. Hobbs Takes a Vacation. You know, what was Maureen O'Hara like, you know? Because I had done the same thing with Henry Fonda. You know, when Henry Fonda realized I was a stage actor, he opened up and told me stories about Mr. Roberts. And he told me stories about Provincetown Playhouse with Betty Davis and rooming with Jimmy Stewart. And I would ask him about, you know, his Alfred Hitchcock movie and Grapes of Wrath. And it's that thing that happens when you're a young actor and you get to meet someone like that. And there's this moment of time when you're not, but they treat you like an equal. And it's just you get this confidence, you know, that just keeps you going in this role, job, career that, you know, for every part you get rejected, you know. I was rejected. You guys all saw the Stranger Things stuff. I was rejected for the season 3, and you lived through that. You know, I've been rejected for some big projects that no one will even remember. But at the time, when you're an actor, they seem so important, and you have to learn to let it go. You know, a starring role with Gene Hackman, starring role with Jack Nicholson, a TV show like Kojak. You have to let it go. You have to let it go, because and it also makes your skin a little tougher, you know. But my wife's constantly telling me to let it go. There's still ones that bother me, and you know, I can't quite, you know. I'll tell her about it once a month, and she just shut up, Robert. Knock it out. It's over. That was 20 years ago. Forget it. You know, you're too old. You're too young. You're too bald. You're too short. You're too tall. You know. So you just have to remember that.
Yes, Lawrence.
The end of Stay Hungry, when all of the bodybuilders are running through the streets. Do you have any stories about that? That's really wild.
Well, if you saw Stay Hungry, which I'm just so grateful and so honored and so flattered and so impressed, you know, that the Aero Theater and that the Beyond Fest and American Cinematheque found a big screen print, because it's a rare one, and it honors the late, great Bob Rafelson. And as I said earlier, one of my favorite movies is his remake of The Postman Always Rings Twice. I just think it's dark and nasty and cynical. But no, the party, the rap party for Stay Hungry, you know, I remember saying goodbye to Arnold, you know, who we all fell in love with. He's just this big, beautiful teddy bear, you know, and he's funny. And, you know, we were all gonna help him. When we came back to home, we were all gonna help Arnold. We found out he owned half of Santa Monica. He owned half of one whole side of the street in Ocean Park already. When we did Stay Hungry, you know, and Sally and Jeff and I, we're gonna help Arnold, right? This guy could buy and sell us, because he'd taken all of his bodybuilding, you know, endorsements, and he bought up the beach side of Ocean Park, from Ocean Park all the way, you know, all the way down to where Venice starts. And I was like, oh, Arnold does not need my help. You know, I was living in a 1-bedroom in Laurel Canyon. And but the rap party, I said goodbye to Arnold and Jeff and Sally and everybody. I think Scatman was gone by then, and a lot of the other actors had left. But I remember the bodybuilders that had run amok that Arnold brought to Birmingham, Alabama. They were still there, because that's the last thing they shot. And a lot of them were in Scatman's room next door to mine and other rooms. And the last thing I remember as I, you know, left to come home was guys literally diving off the 3rd story and the roof into the pool of the motel in Birmingham, Alabama. Guys doing perfect jackknifes, you know, in Speedos, you know, with these phenomenal Arnold Schwarzenegger bodies, you know, diving off the balconies into the pool. And I went, this is a good party, but it's time for me to leave.
Yes.
Is there, I know you started in theater on the stage. Has there ever been a want or need to go back to that?
I actually was just invited to go back to one of my home theaters outside of Detroit, Michigan. You know what it is? I've been spoiled by film work, and I don't have the chops for a sustained run any longer. I could read you a page of Iago from Othello,
Yeah.
and you might be impressed, but I couldn't do it every night. You know, I don't have the chops anymore. I've been spoiled by the immediacy and the concept of takes and coverage that exist in the film world. So I've sort of had to say goodbye to theater. But I am a theater fan, a phenomenal theater fan. I saw The Life of Pi in London recently and sent like 2 or 3 relatives to see it. It's so brilliant. And I'm going to be in New York right at the end of summer. I'm going to, the Sondheim, the tricky Sondheim musical that no one's ever been able to get right. With this, now it's with Daniel Radcliffe and one of the actors from Glee who's on Manhunter. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, and it's hope in reverse. You meet people who sold out to Hollywood and become alcoholics and failed in New York. You meet them when the curtain goes up, and then you go back in time all the way to their youth and innocence and hopes and dreams. And apparently this show in New York with Daniel Radcliffe, apparently they got it right. So I'm really anxious to see it. I love the theater, and all of you, should support it. I know that just about everybody in here would have loved to have seen one of the Harry Potters. And I'll tell you right now, there was a bestseller called A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime that I saw, and it absolutely blew my mind. And the star was like this punk rock star from London. He was amazing. But the whole set was drawers. And I went, what the hell does this mean? The drawers, it's his mind, it's his memory. He has autism. And the first act ends, he's going to go find his mommy in London. And they've been building this thing on the set, and you don't know what it is. And he's taking things out of drawers, memories. And the lights go down, and you hear and he's built a little train out of his Christmas train set with little puffs of smoke. And it's the theatrical way of telling you he's going to London to find his mother. And I was like, I melted. So there's stuff like that out there that not enough people are talking about, that everybody I know, including everybody in here, would love. So you've got to be open to that, as well as all of your love for film and streaming. And don't be afraid to go down on Fridays. Come home, grab a warm beer, sit down, put on, see what's on Apple, see what's on Netflix, see what's on Prime Video. Just see what's on and look at the trailers. That doesn't cost you a penny. And if you see something that looks intriguing to you, Nancy and I are getting addicted to this new show called Silo for you science fiction fans. But you write down a little list on the side of your bed, and then you work your way through it. If you don't like it, you just don't watch it. But every once in a while, you hit gold. So don't be afraid of going down the rabbit hole for streamers. Don't just look at what's fresh that week. Go deeper and see what maybe something that you missed. Remember a couple of years ago, just before COVID, everybody in London, all the young people were addicted to Scandinavian noir. They were all, and it was always, my name is Jan Janssen. I come from Sweden. I had a drinking problem. I'm going to my small town in the snow where my divorced wife left me. I'm going home to recuperate because I beat up a man in a bar in Stockholm. And he goes back to the small town, and the snow's as tall as I am, and he's got a Volvo station wagon, and 5 o'clock shadow, and bags under his eyes like mine, and he drinks a little bit. Yes, Jan, we found a decapitated body down the road here. Could you help us solve this case? Dun, 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 dun. You can't escape evil, except it's just different enough. It's just snowy enough. It's just foreign enough that it's addictive. It's like great addictive detective fiction. So the same thing holds with some sci-fi, what is it, Station 11?
Yeah.
There's some great stuff out there, you guys. Check it out.
In the Freddy Krueger sweater.
That's all of
Yes,
us.
that's a lot.
Does it pass the smell test?
Can you talk to us a little bit about how your directing your first movie, 976 Evil, has influenced you as the mentor that we've seen you become in this documentary?
As a mentor to what? I'm sorry.
So other actors and people in the business.
No, you guys gotta understand something. There's probably 2 or 3 things I could direct on stage well, and maybe even better than well. And when I was younger, if I was younger, there might be a film or 2 in me. But it's the hardest job in the world, directing. And what people want me to direct is not what I'm best at. You won't remember this film, you're all too young, but there's a great Robert Duvall performance with Betty Buckley, the gym teacher from Carrie, called Tender Mercies.
Yeah.
That's the kind of film I think I could do. It's up my alley, my alleyway. But they want me to do horror, and I love horror, but once I have to do those effects, especially the new technology, and the fact that I've had to transition from film to digital, I hear that clock ticking. I'm fine with pre-production. I love post-production. I mean, Tim will tell you this. You can fix a scene with a dog barking, with a train whistle. You can rearrange it. And you marry to it in a literal thing, and then your editor convinces you to, 3-card Monty it a little bit, and you rearrange it. Not everything is 2 and 2 is 4. Sometimes 4 is the result of 3 plus 1, or 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. So you can rearrange it. And I love all that in post-production. But shooting a movie, all I hear is that clock ticking. Because I'm spending somebody else's money, When you're an actor, fuck them. It's not my job to worry about the money. It really isn't. But when you're a director, yeah. No matter how much your producers protect you, it's just a different thing, and it's a stress that my body and my metabolism just isn't designed for. Now, would I love somebody to give me $60,000 to go in a little 200-seat theater in Hollywood and do a wonderful, diverse, interracial, with Frank Sinatra singing Pennies from Heaven while you sit down in the theater version of Our Town, where at the end all the umbrellas are wet and dripping with rainwater as Emily comes out and tells you that she misses the smell of toast and flannel sheets, and a dog barking. Yeah, I could do that. I still got that up my sleeve.
All right, I'm getting the signal that we're out of time, but I'm going to squeeze in one more question. Yes.
The ultimate question, it better be good. The pressure's on.
Good. I've always wondered, how come Freddy Krueger never got his own energy drink?
How come Freddy Krueger what?
Freddy Krueger never got his own energy drink? Like a Nightmare on Elm Street energy drink?
Oh. Freddy Krueger Bolt Cola. No, I'll tell you something. I was, at one point, I was like, really wanted this, because it was gonna make me be able to pay every bill I ever had, including my mortgage off. But I was, right after Michael Jackson caught on fire for Pepsi, they came to me. And it was, Freddy Krueger for Pepsi. And I thought it was going to happen. And something happened between New Line and the lawyers at New Line and the 7-Up people. But it was going to be, I think it was going to be something like the Uncola for the undead. It would just be Freddy. Which I would love to do. But in terms of energy drinks, I don't know. I'm old school, as fancy as I can get is a double espresso.
One thing I just will never forget, because we've sat around a lot and had really good conversations, You were telling me, and you touched upon this, but how so many of the horror actors, you say they don't get to sit with the A-list actors. You say, well, Friday the 13th paid for Paramount to make Ordinary People, but the filmmakers, the actors, kind of treated like a sidestep away from pornographers.
They had to sit by the swinging doors of the commissary kitchen.
And it really is interesting because here we are with all these people celebrating you, and a lot of the people who are so-called the artists, God bless them, but the fan base, the love, the decades of adulation and of the relationship between you and the fans. I don't understand why Hollywood doesn't acknowledge
I
that.
think it's changed him. I think in the last decades it's changed. We see science fiction, fantasy, and horror in the top 10 every week in releases both on cable and stream and in theatrically. So I think it's changed. But there was a moment of time when I was pretty young. I tell this story a lot. This will be my last little story to you, because you're all too young to know this movie and these actors, except for maybe one. But before there was Star Wars, 20th Century Fox was in trouble. And maybe some of you have heard about them selling off all their valuable stuff, the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz and all that. I heard a story that there was a film in the 70s, early 70s, when 20th Century Fox was hurting. They released a little song movie called Dirty Mary and Crazy Larry with Nasty Susan George, who's in that great Peckinpah movie with Dustin Hoffman.
Straw Dogs.
Straw Dogs, the original Straw Dogs, a great film. You should all see it. Anyway, Susan George, Peter Fonda,
Eddie McDowell,
Warren Oates. It's a road movie, and it was a huge hit. Got no respect from the critics, got no respect from the studio, and yet it saved 20th Century Fox and gave them enough money in their coffers that they could option a space movie by George Lucas.
And as we're, coming to a close here, and one of the reasons why I do these documentaries, and the fun part for me is, getting to meet a lot of the different actors that come in, and Robert has obviously, made dreams come true with everybody in here, and that includes me, and I never thought this would happen. Doing this documentary, we're on our soundstage, and each talent comes at their arrival time for hair and makeup and everything else, and next thing I know, is anybody a fan of the original Dynasty?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm literally sitting here and watch to the door, Stephen Carrington. My mouth hits the floor. As a gay man, I literally was just like, I literally could not talk. And of course, these Brits that I work with, I was the joke of the production for the entire time. But because of Robert, I got to meet Jack Coleman, that he worked with on, what was it, Nightmare Cafe? Yeah. So, thank you, Robert.
Yeah. And you all know him from, Save the Cheerleader, Save the World. Jack's just one of them. But, I was walking down the stairs in London once, and I heard this trip behind me and a stumble, and I turned around and I caught this little tiny, she must have been 98 pounds, soaking wet girl, and she'd fallen on the stairs, and it was Amy Winehouse. And I helped her up, and it was like 11 in the morning. She wanted to know where the bar was. Well, I actually knew where the bar was in this hotel, and I took her down, and I left her there, and she was at one end of the bar. She ordered a Bloody Mary or something. You know who was at the other end of the bar? Joan Collins. Speaking of Dynasty, but also that's one of those great things that just happens. On one end of the bar, and there was only 4 stools. It was Joan Collins from Dynasty, English, been working since the early 50s as an ingenue, and stressed that in London, all the way back, dated Richard Burton before Elizabeth Taylor, and on the other end was Amy Winehouse, waiting for a conjugal visit with her boyfriend who was getting out of jail. And I thought, you know what? showbiz. Yeah. Can't live with it, can't live without it.
Well, this has been a great day for movies, Robert. So thanks so